Hello, everyone. We are here together around a square table to talk about a very round topic, circular economy. Some of you might say that it's not really a square, it's a rectangle. But anyway, Juana is joining us from Colombia and she is in charge of the sustainability project and she will explain to us about the drinkable water supply company at Bogota. We have an old friend at the platform also, Mauricio. Mauricio is representing Camohab. He's Mexican and he's also representing Mexico. We have Santiago from Medellin. Se Piensa is his consulting company, and he will tell us what is going on with his initiative in Medellin Green. And also Jorge. Hello, Jorge. How are you? Jorge has a focus on people and he's been working on the human capital development and happiness index development. There are countries who are using their happiness index to measure their welfare, the rights of success. And so let's dig right into it. How can circular economy support different economic sectors and different countries? And what are you doing in your countries? Juana, let's start with you. Tell us the experience of such a high priority sector like water. 6 inhabitants, almost 4% of the inhabitants of this planet. I'm pretty sure you'll be able to tell us more. That live in water scarcity conditions. So, well, thank you very much, Irina. Yeah, I'm part of the environmental corporate agency of water supply company in Bogota. We serve almost 11 million users. Sorry, 2 million users and 8 million inhabitants with the city of Bogota, as well as 11 in neighboring municipalities in Colombia. Now, circular economy in companies is key because, on the one hand, we need to guarantee service supply for all these people in the entire city, especially now in these times of change. So, we really need to be efficient in providing this service. And also, we need to provide sewage systems, we need to treat waste, we need to treat water, and we do have circular challenges just because of the materials resulting from the water purification process. The company in this moment is working on a management plan that will allow us to better serve this treatment demand. Once the new wastewater management plant opens officially, that plant will allow us to process 100% of the wastewater in the city. Right now, as it is, we're all treating 30% of the wastewater in the city. But the idea is to expand the operation. And the result of that will be the generation of tons of leachates being generated every day. And they come in the form of mud. We will use this material for very important processes inside the company, but such processes is maintaining the main ecological structure of Bogota where we have more. So it's about being able to use the materials coming out of the water treatment process. That's a priority for the company. Treated water also resulting from the wastewater treatment is also an opportunity to do some circular management in our sector. Our company is also working towards energy generation plan. Energy generation plan, not only using the resulting mud that I already described, but looking at the potential of drinkable water and the distribution of drinkable water. We've been working on that since the year 2000. We generate power from the pond and the water capture process. So that energy went to waste before. Now we use it and we use it for our distribution process. And today, thanks to that, We are the only water supplier sewage company in in Colombia that is carbon neutral. Though we use green energy, we supply water and we also work towards the preservation of the environment. We also work on many different pilot programs, but the idea is from next year on, we will go 100% to those plans. Circular economy in cities is about integrating systems. You have the power generation system, the sewage system, and the agricultural system, the semi water supply system. Exactly, and it allows for an industrial symbiosis. And an industrial symbiosis, there's a lot of experience in Mexico. Now, Mauricio, tell us a little bit about the Mexican sector and how the industrial symbiosis works in Mexico. I understand that you have the same biosis in the tequila industry as well as in the cement industry.
Exactly. And during the last 15 years, different sectors have started to come together to work on technologies that might be compatible with other processes or with other industries. For example, the cement sector works in some specific plants by using materials, waste materials from hydrocarbons industries with very interesting mechanical properties, especially airborne ash, which is an important additive for cement. So they're coming up with this material that has already gone through a processing cycle and they're repurposing it. And by doing that, they avoid adding other additives that might be harmful to the environment. And that's one case. The other case is the tequila industry. There is an increased efficiency across the entire life cycle of tequila and the entire manufacturing process. But there is waste. They're using this waste to create bioplastic and to explore other materials. This bioplastic is later sold to the automobile industry. This industry is completely removed from the industry of tequila, which is fantastic. We need more support across industries. Now, some challenges still need to be resolved. Mainly scale. Scale means that all industries should start exploring possibilities at a macro level with other industries, with other manufacturing plants in the vicinity, because we still see very specific efforts in certain industries that have tried, different solutions in different parts of the world. And in Mexico, they're replicating the model. What we need to do now is fostering these initiatives forward, scaling them up, as I said. And there's something that I love in Mexico. Industrial sectors have the largest potential for symbiosis because at least the Mexican Association of Industrial Parks says that there are 163 parks across the entire country. They're located in clusters, and you have everything in those industrial parks. You have agricultural industries, and you have other manufacturing processes. 160 plus parks working in symbiosis. I mean, just picture the impact we would be able to generate, not only in resource usage efficiency, which is the tip of the iceberg, but aside from that, you would start developing a myriad different markets for new businesses and a million new job opportunities because there are new stakeholders, managing and working on new technology, which is another important thing. We should be using technology to place it at the disposal of industrial sectors. Mexico is a huge country, so regionally, what could happen in the Northeast is completely removed from what's happening in the South. We're talking about different industries and different resources and different cultures, even. Jorge, I believe, will delve deeper into that. But the point is that you can't apply a model in Oaxaca the same way you would apply it in Monterrey because you're talking about different weather conditions, for example. And when it comes to power generation, when we talk about clean power, Mexico, 80% of the Mexican territory is actually using photovoltaic generation. And we also have the potential to generate wind power, and we're not doing that today. So going forward, Mexico should be a renewable energy generation, a superpower around the world, but it's not happening today. There are things that are underway, but we're taking baby steps, I guess.
So circularity is not a it's not coming across all sectors, but it is happening at a more territorial level. We're gonna dig deeper into that later on. Now, regarding territories, how have you worked at Sapienza, Santiago? Tell us the experience at Medellin.
Well, it's my pleasure to share this space with you all, guys, again. And I believe cities need to go through a historical context of what the last 10 or 15 years have been. I'm talking about the projection and the promotion of circular economy. And I think we need to start by mentioning this confinement that COVID has left us with, because it has accelerated the demand for a circular economy. Within our think tank, we have projected Medellin as a hallmark of innovation and sustainability in the Americas and the Caribbean by complying with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We want to create a brand, our brand green. We want to make it an international benchmark, and we also need to flip the necessity pyramids. We need to turn that pyramid into a circle. So our 2030 goals actually implies that universities and governments and other entities in the Aburrá Valley, almost 40 years of planning all together, we need to make the extra leap. And also other universities have actually promoted the Medellin brand. We believe our brand is important because it promotes circular economies. We have an example, Leonisa. We have helped them get the plastic PET resin with 20% cotton can actually be used to create excellent sportswear. Now, that means that there are large economy sectors such as the agribusiness, the food industry, the fashion industry, and construction. All of these are migrating into circular economy very fast. This growth is so accelerated, and it's even more accelerated in this confinement. Now, the post-COVID scenario will offer us with a possibility that we will see circular economies inside cities as a must-have for public policy, not just creating public policy for circular economy, but actually having this model be mandatory. We have made giant leaps on this regarding the Aburrá Valley, because if you want to finance large-scale buildings for hotels, for example, for horizontal property or any commercial activity or office space, they have to comply with 5 environmental sustainability guidelines if you want to get the license. These are baby steps in the right directions. And obviously, all of these initiatives are aligned with the 17 Millennium Development Goals, as well as the ICLEI Low Carbon City Network is promoting our way, the Metropolis Network and all of that conglomerate, such as the Circular Economy Platform for the Americas that facilitate this normalization of circular economy as something that is present in our DNA. And if we wanted to get a metaphor of circular economy, is actually to reconcile with the territory, much like indigenous communities did, and as well as to promote the responsible use of the natural resources of our territory towards the holistic development of human beings. So Medellin is actually a lesson learned more than anything. We've learned lessons from other countries that force us to think about our own behavior, about shifting our awareness, and about something that we have called the 4C cities of the future. These 4Cs are compact, zero emissions. Zero is spelled with a C in Spanish, as well as others. That can actually open the process for human resources and companies are developing to tell us what this new demand is going to be like, the new demand, the new corporate demand, as well as the academic sector, because we are looking for new training opportunities and educational opportunities geared towards circular economies.
Perfect. That's an excellent introduction for Jorge to tell us about human capital and what you do when it comes to Medellin live in a better way.
Right. Santiago was saying something that's very important, I think, because raising awareness inside companies previous to the pandemic was actually moving on a scale from 1 to 10 was actually 3 or a 4. Now this pandemic has actually accelerated that. on a very deep level, because people who are already confined, they're sheltering in place, they're isolated at home. At least in Colombia, we've been isolated for like 8 months. Everybody's working at home, and since everybody's working at home and has been working at home for 7 months, people start going crazy. And the fact that people start going crazy, that forces managers and CEOs to really start thinking about what to do with the people. That's in the end, that's a bottom line for companies. It's a direct impact on the bottom line. Bottom line meaning cost cutting or profitability, saving up time in terms of process execution. What we've seen is that companies, and we're talking about companies of every kind, have really tried to look into ways of training their staff so that in 6 areas of their lives, it's called the wheel of life, by the way, which is closely related with with circularity. It's about how employees can achieve a balance in life in such a way that they can get personal well-being and peace of mind, and this well-being and peace of mind will foster the economic well-being of companies.
Now, one thing is confinement. I think confinement has actually leveraged this accelerated change, sort of the revolution of the 4.0 industry. And it is 4.0 revolution industry, which is so important for circular economy. Juan, tell us how you have incorporated technology, or how has this pandemic times accelerated the usage of certain technologies? Well, for my company, this pandemic has been an interesting time period because people are staying at home, obviously, and we expected an increasing consumption as a result of confinement. Now, that didn't happen. Domestic consumption increase wasn't as high as we expected. We assumed people stopped taking showers, and there was a huge decline in commercial and industrial consumption. That is the impact of the pandemic in our sector. I'm talking about water consumption specifically. And on the other hand, digitalization was certainly a process that was forced on us to accelerate. That digitalization process inside our company and outside, when it comes to customer service, most administrative employees, at least, obviously operation staff, they really continue to work as if nothing had happened because we supplied water. And this service cannot stop. But other companies' processes were highly digitalized in a very quickly manner. Our collaborators had to develop technologically capabilities, connection capabilities in order to maintain those collaboration processes from a distance. Now, specifically, I joined the company right in the middle of this pandemic, so workplace dynamics for me were not typical, to put it some way. But I believe we had been able to consolidate a work team that's heavily committed to new goals, because this is a new year in many ways. I mean, we're under a new administration this year. We have a strategic plan, also add a pandemic to that. So again, on top of that, we were working towards digitalizing the water bill as well as digitalizing our user communication channels. And that has an impact on circular economy and environmental strategies of the company that has reduced the consumption of some materials. And it shows us that it is possible. It is possible for us to achieve our circular goals, provided that we had the willingness to do so and provided we invested those tools that make it possible for us to take another step towards dematerializing operations. Excellent. Mauricio, in Mexico, what are some of the sectors that have accelerated a transition towards a 4.0 industry?
Well, Mexico is very interesting. There are really high technology sectors. For example, if you go to the Bajío region where the Querétaro city is located, you will see an accelerated digital explosion there, mainly applied to the aeronautical services. We're seeing a lot of startups coming up with very specific aeronautical services, and there's a whole revolution of industry materials. But that's specific. We're not talking about the Bajío region and the aeronautical industry. Now, when you talk about the automobile industry, you will feel that it's a little bit more disaggregated in the country. My city, Puebla, has the Plusvalin plant, and it has had the plant for 40 years. Audi arrived in that region like 3 or 4 years ago. In Bajío, we have American companies, Ford, a couple assembly plants working for Asian firms. So transformation in these regions actually go hand in hand with a lot of technology because of the nature and the culture of these regions. Mexico is I think the 14th or the 15th technology producer in the world. I mean, well, we're filled with technology. Everything is instrumentalized. Everything is monitored. There's Technology is very efficient. Not to mention the steel sector, but when it comes to the service sector, has a lot of challenges. And the pandemic showed us in no uncertain terms that we're not prepared for a full digitalization across the entire country. There's this thing that we oftentimes fail to see in the manufacturing sector, and it is the communication sector. Children are actually getting an education from open access television, and there are many areas in Mexico that do not have access to public networks. That's a challenge in and of itself. We need to use technology to convey education to these children, because through it, we will also be able to deliver publicity and marketing and other consumption vehicles, if you will. But all of that needs to be at the service of education. And as I said, Mexico, one of the biggest challenges in Mexico is that it's really big. A lot of communities are isolated. They have no technological participation at all. And a question comes to my mind upon hearing what Juana just shared with us. With all of that information, what are we doing with all of that information coming from our cities? I mean, we're using data. Are we using data only to become more efficient? Or are we using it to plan or reconfigure development? Are we using all that data in order to move towards our goals? Are we thinking of what sort of companies to support, what companies needed to rise up, what companies need to show up to the market? It's just what Santiago was telling us about Medegreen. It's about educating these children to become employees of the future. They should be equipped with the skills necessary to function in the 4.0 industry. We need to remove the stigma that the 4.0 industry has, and it is that it's going to make a lot of jobs disappear. Would you think it's fair to have a job employment where where people are just standing up, looking at a monitor, watching what happens, and that's it? I think that's underestimating the potential talent we have today. What we have to do with technology is we have to use it in repetitive process. We need to use it for those processes that do not need human talent, to free up time for people to use elsewhere in the company. That's the challenge. It's not about technology taking away our jobs. It's about technology giving us the possibility to have more free time to do more added value things.
Yeah, internet is a human right, connectivity as well. For big companies, the challenge is to actually make that data available to create more intelligent cities. You wanted to say something about it? Yeah, Mauricio, I wanted to go back to what you said. One thing that we learned through the pandemic, especially through the quarantine period, is that the quality of the water getting to the northern part of the city proved because upstream we have a lot of industry, and that industry shut other facilities during the quarantine period, so the water improved. And realizing that during the pandemic is inspired the management to start looking for solutions to work with the upstream manufacturing plants, for them to develop projects to mitigate the water pollution that we're getting to the northern system. And they're usually very expensive to treat. So that data created during the pandemic and was actually useful. And on the other hand, we were just selected for a pilot project in that instrumentalizing waste monitoring and at an industrial level. Basically our task will be to monitor companies that are dumping the waste into the water by using technology, Internet of Things. Hopefully, well, actually, we did a presentation just this last Friday. I mean, the purpose is to make a decision of how to do it, but yeah, we need to work on that. Santiago, tell us, how smart is Medellin in terms of clustering sustainable innovation and entrepreneur systems? Do you have any quick wins? Do you have any companies setting the standard?
It's what Mauricio and Juana mentioned is really interesting, actually, because back in 2018, the UN put out a report on the future jobs that were no longer going to be around. And as you said, Mauro, it's maybe not technology that will wipe out the 75 million job positions, but maybe it's no longer visiting certain human activities, such as being mechanical and operational. That is a function universally loved by machines. So automatization and robotics will cut down on high turnout manual manufacturing practices, and it will stimulate 109 million job positions. And that's where Medellin's strategy is focused on. We know there's a big citizenship critical mass that will be capable to get the skills and the knowledge that is needed. Now, the fourth industrial revolution is actually a bygone thing in some countries. They're already talking about the fifth industrial revolution. So maybe we need to look at Latin America to find out what the fifth industrial revolution is going to look like. And the International Monetary Fund accelerated the 2030 goal where we were going to see those job losses. But today, that job loss, it happens as a deficiency in the economic system. For example, we are seeing how mass transport operation staff, boats, airplanes, you name it, are being automized. So that's the first sector that's going to undergo the great change. Now, as Mauro said, what are those professionals going to be focused on? Or are we maybe going on to knowledge epistemology phase where we want to fuse knowledge? For example, cyber anthropology, bioethics, other areas of knowledge more focused on sustainable material engineering and development. So this confinement allowed us to reassess the relevance of education across all levels, because we're replicating an almost 200-year-old model that is actually training us in a factory-like academic structure with uniforms completely regulated, and that's short-circuited, I think. Let's discuss something else. Why did the Great Confinement happen? Not because of any conspiracy theory that some apocalyptic virus was going to get here, but because we knew, or at least those who are authorities on environmental affairs, erosion, climate change, that it was highly likely that a zoonotic disease would happen. Because, the right conditions are there, populational density in cities, etc. So we're only projecting what was already clear. And so what has Medellin done? Cities are not islands, they're not siloed. So we have to talk about the Aburrá Valley, because the Aburrá Valley is populated with several different cities and municipalities, and there are a lot of different thoughts. But everybody has focused on the developing. So we have four projects in the Aburrá Valley. One is the circularity and innovation circuits. Right now, we have forecasted for to impact 5 million inhabitants. One is located in Medellin. It was inaugurated last Saturday, receiving a visit by the Minister of Culture in Colombia. And it features, energy efficiency features, etc. We're also going to do the Technological Envigado District, which is a project that we've been working on for 10 years along with South Korea. It's the only one of those projects supported by the Korean government in our city, And also we're going to develop the smart fashion district at Itagüí, and in the future, the Metropolitan Film Society in the northern area of Medellin in the Aburrá Valley. As you can see, we believe in two big projects in order to consolidate going from the fourth industrial revolution to the fifth industrial revolution, and that can only happen through digital transformation. If today we have non-government organizations and academic organizations do not participate in the development of the industrial agenda, and if we fail to act on how digital platforms can transform our territories and wipe out poverty even, which is something else that we have to work on when it comes to circular economy. We have to look to poverty, and we have to look at how much circular economies can contribute to the equality on our countries that are so unequal as it is right now.
Jorge, how fair is the post-COVID transition in terms of development or human development?
Now that Santiago just was telling us about all of these projects, and Mauricio mentioned the thing about how machines were going to replace some job positions. What I started thinking, and I was like, man, this is going to be a transition that, it's going to be very difficult for some people because they have built these habits, and they have been doing so for 10, 20, 30 years. And in 3 months, COVID wiped out all of that. It pretty much destroyed all of those old habits. So it has caused two things in people. Number one, noise in the brain. It doesn't let them think. Or number two, brain freeze. Either of those prevents creative thought. And maybe 5 or 10% of the people went like, hold on, we have to push onward. And those people are actually reflecting on what their talents are. What are my talents? That's what they're wondering. And that's at the forefront of the machines doing automatic things. Anyway, there's a human development. And who is the consumer? Human beings. And we have to relate with other humans, and that's where the capability lies. So when I start wondering about what my talents are, and since I have that talent, I'm going to take on that role. This is the role that the rest of the team needs to tackle. By team, I mean the other people that I'm going to be working with. I need to become aware of the activities I have to start engaging on so that I can add value to the companies and myself. And that should give me time to start. Now, going back to the first question about achieving that life balance in aspects such as health, family, training and education, social aspects, spirituality, why not, values, and of course the professional aspect and also the economy. This is going to be painful. I would say that probably 30% of all of us are they're going to suffer because the transition between a set of habits to another is going to be difficult. 50% of the population will be able to go through this threshold with great effort, and maybe 30 or 20% of the citizenship is already on the new paradigm. We can see it. There are companies that actually became empowered by the pandemic. They actually did better. And the great benefactor of this new impulse is COVID-19.
You are going to say something, Santiago?
Well, yeah. What Jorge mentioned is very interesting because this lockdown made it easier to understand that there were sort of like three things regarding the old production model that weren't as necessary. Number one, mobility. We realized that mobility wasn't really a requirement because digitalization reduced space through time. You know, uh, an English theoretist, Immanuel Wallerstein, talked about that. It was about digital platforms reducing space through time. You can actually broadcast to Australia, and even mentioning a more hypothetical case, reduction in flights in time. Technology is only going to get better and it's going to increase the speed at which airplanes fly. But the other variable that we realized wasn't that necessary was the amount of infrastructure around work. Because in this moment, one thing replaced everything: households, homes. So we're going back to the origins, back when we were nomadic. Literally, your only means of survival was your family, and to move around the place constantly, get to a point of a new work scenario, of a new work social scenario. The house is for entertainment and leisure, right? And it's your shelter, the place where you rest, the place where you get food. So the city models based on factories, in the case of Latin America and North America, will go through major, major changes, which is why our task is to induce today and through the next 10 years some changes that are as least disruptive as possible. They should follow in our example. Children are the future. But that's the stupidest thing we can mention, because the future is us, because children learn by example and we're not giving them a good example.
Fantastic. I can't, I have to, as we say in Chile, I have to make the most of what you said. We're talking about rethinking models, and rethinking models is the maximum curriculum circular economy. So I would like you to tell us about the role of eco design on everything you've learned. Eco designing on your time, and with all the research conducted about it, because eco design should be at the forefront of this new way of doing things, this new mindset. How has eco design progressed, and what does the future of eco design hold in Colombia? Well, I mean, more than eco design, eco design is about involving environmental variables when it comes to product design. I would talk about design for sustainability. Design for sustainability provides me with a methodological approach to rethink really complex problems we have in a race towards sustainability. And, paying attention to what was said about poverty and employment, we have to undergo this transformation. Confinement has allowed us to undergo these transformations. And only a privileged few have been able to achieve that, especially in our Latin American countries. This privileged few have a home, have a household, have an access to education. They have some sense of safety. Their livelihoods are not under constant threat. We're talking about only 5 or 10%. And in our particular context, the large majority of the population is currently facing challenges that aren't being solved and will not be solved by circular economy. They should be solved by sustainability, and yet they aren't. So design and its methodological focused, which is abductive in nature, is divergent, offers those epistemological elements that Santiago mentioned in order to integrate different needs, unite different needs. I can't just solve environmental problems along the line. Okay, how can I create less waste? How can I become more efficient when it comes to generations? How can I be more efficient when using water? Unless I think of other contexts, context other than my own. That is the big added value that design has to offer. And I'm not a designer, I'm an economist. And a big question that I always had as an economist was, where is individuality in all of these models? Where is individuality in public policy, for example? Well, design gives me an opportunity to integrate individuality in the solutions I seek. As I said, I am not a designer, and my career has been, I guess, more from an outsider perspective. But what I can see is that Medellin is a leader and a pioneer, and that Medellin has brought designers onto public policy making. Look at sewage systems, for example. When it comes to sewage systems, we have a big problem with oil, like cooking oil. People dump their old oil in the sink. And also wet wipes. People flush wet wipes down the toilet. That's a huge problem. So we're thinking about how to change or modify the behavior of our users, and design for sustainable behavior is a source of inspiration for us. We're also working with the Secretary of Culture of Bogota, with Rosario University and with other experts from Mexico. They're providing advice regarding how we can better create options to modify this behavior. So in Colombia, the role of design, more than integrating those complex issues, it seeks to tackle those really complex problems from many different perspectives, and ultimately inform public policy. How about service design, Mauricio? What do you think about designing services? Because design to products is applied to products and services also.
Well, I'm going to go a little bit further back before answering your question. For example, when we design, I'm not a designer either, I'm an engineer, but when we design the business model and the value proposal of Camel Hub back in 2016, sorry, we pictured a lot of we we realized with this pandemic that we weren't as crazy as we initially thought. We weren't as naive as we thought. We basically had a pitch where we told people, ladies and gentlemen, we bring you remote working as a time efficiency, as unoccupied infrastructure efficiency, and everybody would look at us maybe thinking like, yeah, it looks so nice, but maybe it's gonna take 10 years or 15 years before we get there. And also, this is gonna cost me also, when we pitched this to CEOs, because they already had a building, they already had an infrastructure, so everybody was like, it looks too pretty, but it's maybe not for me. So we had to evolve, we had to adapt, but we never got rid of that idea, and we basically started working with what people needed or were asking for. So we came up with co-working. Co-working as a cooperative collaboration. We can start helping one another to solve specific problems. And back in 2018, 2019, we realized that it's still a niche thing. It's for millennials, it's for entrepreneurs, it's for startups. But really big operations still look at co-working as just a child's play. We know that people in the Scandinavian peninsula work like that, but in Latin America, it is still perceived as people pretending to be business people, you know? And if they come up with something disruptive, something that looks like a unicorn, we'll incorporate it. But that doesn't happen mostly. So that was sort of the evolution process for us. Now, what's happening right now with the pandemic, and with this, I will answer the question. More than designing a service, I, as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, as a designer, whatever my technique might be, we have to start picturing the citizen of the future. What does a citizen of the future look like? And what future? 2022 is the future, but also 2040. My bet would be looking at citizens that will be living in carbon neutral worlds that the United States is working on. China's working on that. Colombia's working on that. So I want to start picturing what that citizen of the future looks like, because I have to start working on creating that citizen now. And I'm 40 years old, and change is going to hurt me, you know. I have 40 years worth of habits that I need to revolutionize. So I think public utilities and services are the big catalyst. We're no longer talking about products. Products are vehicles to satisfy something, to quench thirst, to self-groom, or to get food in our stomachs or whatever. And there will be a portion of the industry still producing those products, quote unquote, on principles of sustainability, where we will get more sustainable, more smarter products. Other products are slower on this process than others, but there's a trend. And that trend is change. Regulatory frameworks need to provide the foundations for us to do what we do, because that is heavily connected with public utilities. We've been analyzing the regulatory framework in Mexico, focused on how regulatory frameworks need to become the catalyst for circular economy. We realize that what we have is a 10 or 12 piece puzzle that don't really come together. You're mentioning wastewater treatment that does not mention climate change, for example. And this is not reflected in practice, at least in Mexico. There is a climate change in Mexico that is 5 years old, which is completely disconnected from eco design. It doesn't mention it even. We have bills of law mentioning things associated to circular economy, but from a recycling standpoint, waste management standpoint, from the standpoint of what do we do with what I have left, as opposed to keeping that waste from happening in the first place, and where a lot of concepts are discussed, but these concepts are not that close to reality. Research, a lot of research is mentioned a lot in those bills of law, but how? Through which program? I mean, there are no mechanisms to really change behaviors. This is not a criticism on my part. This is a pressing problem that we need to solve. We need to provide sustenance to those seedlings of ideas. Again, back to public utilities, back to services. What sort of services do we need to develop? We need to develop services for citizens in the future. How do I move today? The digital mobility platforms were just starting out 10 years ago, and today they are lifesavers. They're solution providers. We need to improve the metrics in order to find out what is wrong with those platforms, because there are things that are wrong with those platforms that we need to improve. For example, when it comes to public utilities, we need stronger management, because today it is complex as it is. Now, picture 2040, where 90% of the population in the planet will live in cities, and we will have less resources because we'll have to fetch water from further away. So how are we going to work on that? Well, through data, because data will allow us to make those services available. But then,
to open up data and everything. I'm sorry, Annie. It's not about sharing it.
It's not about sharing it. It's more, are we willing to share that data? That's the first question. How far are we willing to open data? To what extent? Because systems have to be based on open data, at least public information. Yeah, what he said is very interesting, because currently we have a population growth projection where 20% of the population will live in mega cities, more than 10 million inhabitants. So we're talking about 47 plus mega cities. And this growth is going to stop in those mega cities, and small cities are the ones that are going to start growing disproportionately. And that's the effect you were discussing. Circular economy first gets to high socioeconomic levels, to the developed world, to big cities, and then finally to small cities. So currently, I think the most important need is how to project our territory to comply with those needs. In the Aruba Valley, we signed the construction of the Software Valley, which is our way to democratize Wi-Fi, internet, big data as a fundamental right. But since it's a right, we need to think about public appropriation of knowledge. When we talk about public appropriation of knowledge, what we mean is with what autonomy, with what criteria can people gain access to information? How do you have access to information? Is it censored? Is it free? Is it open? Do you have base knowledge so that you can digest this information adequately, or is it biased? All of that is going to be absolutely determining when it comes to when and for how long these cities are going to live into the future. Counting all three valleys, the two big municipalities along the valley of Antioquia, we're talking about Rio Negro and other municipalities. We have to talk about more compact cities in their development models. They're smaller, they're more compact, they're more specific, but they are able to satisfy all the needs of the territory. These are delocalization models. I need for these people to be able to solve or to meet their needs where they are.
How about SMEs, small and medium skilled companies, and even startups and micro companies? How are they going towards adapting to climate change?
Thank you for the question, because in Colombia, and especially in Antioquia, almost 80% of business people are small scale and medium scales, and in 2 years, the continuity of the business is discarded. It goes bankrupt, and currently they're the big representatives of adaptation to circular economy, because they realize that it's more efficient and cheaper. Which is something that we are actually trying to convey to the national government and local governments when it comes to the circularity of public policy. Not creating public policy for circular economy, but rather to put it in there cross-cuttingly. So to conclude, if we fail to combine several different ways of approaching the future in the next 10 years, we will have employability systems that will stimulate precariousness. And we want to curb that. Look at Uber, Rappi, etc. They make the young people economy precarious, so there would essentially be two class of people: those who have the possibility to understand circular economy and to live the reality of an anarchic world, and poor people. So to wrap up, the question is, people in situations of vulnerability, are they living climate change the way we do? No. People in situations of vulnerability, did they go through the same confinement measures as we did? No. 7 people inhabit 4 square meter households. So I believe that today we have to, this is bullfighting. This historic moment is pretty much bullfighting, and it's up to us to decide how to bullfight. So the big decision out of this CEFA, I think, should be to get a manifesto out, to put it out in the open. The Caribbean region and Latin America needs to understand that we need to become together, and we need to use our territories in a different way.
Exactly, because SME is what capabilities do SMEs have in order to adapt to human capital to this? Because in the end, what they're trying to do is they're trying to survive to get to the bottom line in green numbers, not in red numbers.
All right. When Santiago said what he said, and what you just said was actually what I was wondering in my head. Why? Because the big social and economic responsibility, because it's not just these people in high socioeconomic levels, 5 and 6, the business owners, the CEOs, those people who have this knowledge need to transmit that in a waterfall fashion. And that is not only a social commitment. These people need to know that this is an investment into their companies surviving into the future, because who supports all of these people? It's not the owner, it's the employees. And if employees start becoming aware, and even more so owners, of this, like Santiago, going like Santiago, you're no longer going to be counting those things up. But what's your talent? Well, I love to cook. What do you mean cooking? You like cooking? What do you cook? Well, I mean, I like to bake cakes. Oh, really? All right, so come over here. I need you baking cakes because that's exactly what we need to exploit. Exactly. Exactly. And I'm with Mauricio 100% on that one because we have a cross cutting component, a transversality. There is a transversality thing here. It's about how I can create new products, better products with the talent I have today. Look, 8 or 9 years ago, we went to Barcelona to learn more about how the textile companies were doing over there. We visited a company in Barcelona, 1820 something. They started in the 1800s and they came up with canvas fabric for ship sails. Why? Because that's the common means of transport. The Wright brothers weren't even born back then, you know. So 2005, back in 2005, 2006, they had stores. They didn't produce one single thing. They produced everything in the Far East. I mean, and they just traded everything and commercialized everything. And they had their textile business line and they had other parallel business lines. They produced fabric dyes. They needed to have a relationship with what they knew, with their expertise, but these were new business lines. And that's how they progressed into the future, because otherwise they would have died.
Yes, they would have died. Before we were discussing things at a micro level, mainly as amazing how to adapt to climate change, but from there upwards, in Chile, for example, investment on research and development has gone down, as well as in culture. Because of this pandemic, the government needs to focus on reactivating the economy. But tell me about applied research. Are you working with universities? What's the university industry relationship? How does knowledge get to the industry? And that's actually the underline of sustainability. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Colombia specifically, the water supply and sewage services company in Bogota, development is absolutely fundamental because of several different reasons. On the one hand, we can use development to provide an efficient service and to achieve the company goals, the strategic goals. The customer's satisfaction is key to us, fulfilling the requirements of every stakeholder involved. And also, we have an area exclusively dedicated to management and knowledge. So within the company, we have a highly prepared team working on these processes, informing the rest of the areas of the company, but it is leveraged by public universities and private universities in different areas. For us, the environment, when it comes to the environment, we use these types of alliances and cooperations for things such as climate change. Climate change is crucial in this moment regarding supply. Biodiversity, water doesn't come from the tub. I mean, it does, and it doesn't at the same time, if you know what I mean. It depends on several different variables, and it depends on the assets of the company. We have green infrastructure assets, and we also have environmental assets that allow us to provide our services. So we are conducting research on the condition of those ecosystems. And as I said just a moment ago, we are dealing deeply into culture, behavior also. And to that end, we are working with universities such as the Rosario University in this case. I guess the idea is for us to be able to share knowledge. Those are the collaboration relationships facing forward. But also, we have a resource that we believe is very important to use inside of the company, facing inside inward the company. It's not just the people working in the company, they're also in specific interests that are important for the transformation process inside the company. For example, we have master classes, workshops, and presentations where different collaborators and individuals shared knowledge with everyone. We're a 3,000 employee company. There's a lot of us. I'm an economist, and the other day I listened to the presentation of hydrologist who was making a presentation at the change gas or water system. And the information shared there is absolutely fundamental. So those outside alliances are absolutely crucial with universities and academia. But it is also important to disseminate knowledge inside of the company that I guess will allow us to find new and better opportunities. And we're doing exactly that regarding circular economy. For the last 3 months, we've been working on finding opportunities to implement circular economy by using the knowledge that's within the company.
I like to start out by something that my grandfather used to say. He would say to us, all right, I'm going to try to remember it. You have to love what you have instead of having what you love. It doesn't mean you have to conform. It means that you have to use what you have to build what you want. It's about playing the cards you were dealt. We're always looking at what we're missing, what we're lacking. For example, let's come up with a project. Oh, but that needs financing, and I don't have the financing. I don't have the funds. Or, that requires a lot of technology. Or only large companies can do that, and we can't. We're always shifting responsibility and accountability because it is easier, It is an excuse. Now, when we look at what we do have, which is the knowledge of my colleagues, the knowledge of the company itself, installed capacity, sometimes we're blind to the potential of things we already have. And that's the beginning of transformation. That is where circular economy needs to start. Yesterday, we were discussing this, and I believe we need to make a great deal of emphasis on this. And it is that circular economy has to become a lifestyle. It can no longer be held by the people who know about circular economy. It has to leave academia. It has to leave the companies. It has to reach everybody. People are demanding different services and different solutions for their lives, and that alone will transform the industry completely. Why would an industry change the way they're producing today if no one is going to pay them more for doing things in a different manner? If nobody's going to demand different things from them? If no one says to the company, hey, I don't really care for the negative impacts your company is having on the environment. That is certainly not happening today. However, if the market starts realizing that people are no longer going to buy things from them because of the lack of sustainability, you have to move. You have to do something about it because otherwise you die as a company. So we have to begin by transforming the lifestyle of everybody who's there today. And this brings me back to the concepts of citizenship. So how am I going to transform that inside my company, whether I work at a multinational or an SME? Let's look at what we have. How can I add value to my potential customers? And also, we have to stop standardizing consumers. Consumers are extremely differentiated as it is right now. a person of a certain age and of a certain context wants something different from the person living next door because they, I don't know, they're younger or they're older because they have kids because they're in different conditions, and we often perceive the market to be an entity, a formless entity.
Removed from humans.
I mean, and when you go to the market, when it comes to building a value proposition, what do they tell you? What is the first thing they tell you? Segmentation. It's about archetypes. It's about Juana. Understanding that Juana needs something very different from Irina. Irina is completely different from Juana. No one is better than the other. They just have different needs. And when you establish these differentiation elements, understanding the context, understanding the necessity, that's when you start coming up with the solutions.
How can we get these differentiation solutions for climatically neutral industry? How do we secure a fair transition, a more inclusive economy? What sort of things that they're doing in Medellin regarding this? Are you working with baseline recyclers? What is this fair transition looking like in Medellin?
Well, I hope that in 10 years we are no longer going to be so screwed as we are now. I have a 9-year-old kid, and hopefully when he turns 18, hopefully he will not know what circular economy is, because that is what the economy is going to be. He's just going to call it the economy. That's a model that we're developing in the territory under 3 views. One, how we can provide a more entrepreneurial aspect to baseline recyclers. We don't want them just to collect waste, but also we want them to have the know-how to transform them to create new products. Second, we're trying to create, so to speak, a monopoly of the efficiency in public sectors led by Empresas Públicas de Medellín. We're trying to get a diversification of public utilities based on sustainability. And currently, that allows public administration, the mayor's office in Medellin, to have best practices when it comes to collection regarding the payment of public utilities, because there is a very strong...
Wait, is there a payment for waste collection?
Yes, waste collection, correct.
Waste collection, correct.
Well, I mean, that's interesting because at a judicial level, as a metropolitan area in Colombia, regarding our international scope, there is an organic land ordinance plans law that allows cities to organize in provinces or metropolitan areas. And Medellin, during the last 40 years, has built a metropolitan area to impact all 10 municipalities. These 10 municipalities get together every month. And they say, for example, I'm going to pay 12% of my environmental fees towards the development of the entire territory. And the management of the metropolitan area gives back double to each of the municipalities so that they can have a positive impact on the environment and territory planning or land ordinance planning, among other things. Now, when it comes to efficiency of the utility services in Antioquia, is payment for vertical infrastructure higher than 6 stories. So in order for us to stimulate vertical growth on the valley, not on the slopes, because we're a canyon that has seen some urbanization on the slopes of the mountains, which is a problem going forward because it impacts the quality of life of the inhabitants. And the third element that we've been working with Medellin towards moving to sustainability is that the companies along the Aburrá River, they're giant, typical extractivist operations. We want them to migrate to the 4.0 level of doing things. So we see a necessity of industrializing the region, and that is another project by the clusters and the Chamber of Commerce in the metropolitan. The metropolitan area has industrially deaccelerated during the last 15 years, trying to replicate this North American model. And we are trying to scale up these dynamics in the region regarding the new entrepreneurship generation. To answer the question, I believe that the best way for us to adapt to the generational lifestyle, practice, change, production, and study modifications will come from demands placed on the company. It's about how companies adapt to fulfilling the needs when it comes to consumption and sustainability, but from the starting point of this whole pyramid, which is family. If the family doesn't modify behaviors, then it's going to be very difficult to reach that stability point.
Now, from your point of view, where you work, tell me, what do you think about biolife to be disseminated as a cross-cutting concept on industrial economy? Circular economy, I don't know why, has become a hot topic of conversation.
Well, the concept of bioeconomy, when a person that has only studied up until fourth grade, you talk to them about bioeconomy, it's like, they're not going to understand. Circular economy, I'm going to be honest with you, they will not be able to understand that concept. However, these two words are interesting. Economy means money, and circular, that's interesting. They have a starting point to, I guess, to picture something in their head. I think it's on us. And when I say us, I mean us as family members, us in academia, us as business people, us in universities. Hopefully universities would change this term, their laboratories.
They're laboratories because they have 3,000 people in a closed environment.
Yeah, against their will, because schools and universities, there should be a subject like English. I don't know. It's more important, with all due respect to math. I love math, and with all due respect to biology, there should be a subject about mixing math, economy with biology, with circularity. There should be a subject, We should be able to teach children how to educate their parents, because parents are no longer learning, Those of us who are involved with circularity are still learning, but that's it. That's a big challenge, the big national challenge, because the governments, the countries are in charge with regulating academia or education, I guess, at least in our country, in Colombia. And with this new dynamic, we've been talking about circular economy for 4 years. We've been talking about platforms for 4 years. We've started talking about circularity more. And something that Juana mentioned was that, people are no longer taking showers. No, confinement, sheltering in place. Look, because we have to separate two concepts. Pandemic is one thing, and confinement is a different thing. Those often are correlated, and it raised awareness. Confinement caused people to think, all right, so since our income went down 30 to 40%, everybody started thinking about how to keep what they had while earning less. In times of crisis, that's the spark of creativity. These moments make it possible for us to get creative. And again, this to me is, talent, delegating within the family. Mom doesn't really have to do everything around the house because she has to work too. And dad has to work too. So all of this make what it causes is an 8-year-old son, such as yours, as to go like, okay, wait a second. You can tell the kid, you're going to help us out, and you're going to monitor the taps. You're going to make sure that no tap is leaking in this house. You're going to make sure that budgets are complied with in this house. You're going to make sure that waste should go in the corresponding bins And then this is going to create awareness. And once this son of yours turns 18, he's no longer going to be thinking about circular economy. He's just going to be thinking about the economy. It's going to be natural.
It's gonna be natural, right? Right. Currently, I'm living far away from Santiago, way to the south of Chile. Not yours. No, I'm living far away from Santiago, from the city, from the big city, from the metropolis. And my God, it's really difficult to recycle. We don't have the infrastructure where I live to recycle plastic. And Chile has a contradiction, that keeps it from being circular. It's 4,500 of it. I mean, it's Chile. Right, that's perfect. Yeah, since it is a hot chili pepper, it's difficult to foster recycling habits. Sometimes I'm around home and my daughter would see me doing certain stuff and she'll go like, "That's so not circular, mom." So what are your circularity habits? Let's go one by one. Yeah. The ones here will have more time to think about their answers. Well, I arrived in Colombia from Europe. I had been living in Europe for 7 years and I moved in with my parents after I came back to Colombia. We have a saying in Colombia, I can either separate waste at home. I can separate at home, but it all goes in the same truck. That's what they say in Colombia. So during confinement, we pretty much had a revolution in my parents' house when it comes to disposing of waste. Actually, he started cooking. He'd never cooked once in his entire life, and they take turns now after 8 months.
And I guess he's happy cooking, right?
Yeah, he likes to cook now. It was a challenge, and that's how we presented it to him. We're gonna do a cooking contest at home. This is gonna be like a cooking reality show. And it's exactly the same thing we did with waste disposal. We separate waste at home, or dinner waste, plastic, glass, pets. We started doing that in Colombia, and I'm still doing it. So I try not to get rid of my clothes because we had this recycling program. At home. I guess that's what I do back home.
All right, we work with innovation, and that's a concept I'm really fond of because I grew up with innovation. I come from a family where we had a lot of athletes. I have you know, a brother who's a soccer player, and I have cousins who are taekwondo practitioners, etc. And I think turning circular or going circular, I can't really say that I'm more circular than others. This is not a contest, but I believe that every day we get to do things that we hadn't tried before when it comes to circularity. Uh, the, I've really gone circular during the last 5 years. I started finding a lot of added value in products of a better quality. For example, vegetables that are agricultural chemical free, vegetables cut the day you order them. For example, an avocado coming from a farm from a couple of kilometers away. This avocado has never gone into a cold room, and it is cheaper than the one that's not as good, that has been refrigerated in the supermarket. There's a delivery service, so that means that you don't have to go get it. And there's a social accountability chain along that line. You know that the person growing the avocado is getting paid better compared to how you would consume that avocado under the traditional market. I'm Mexican, and avocado, we have to have avocados. If you find one better with all of these benefits, you'll go like, well, I mean, that's a no-brainer. I don't even really need to be circular. I'm just a consumer that doesn't really have to think about the model. I mean, that's a product. That's what there is. A sustainable avocado. That's all there is. When it comes to mobility, I've lived in different cities and countries and even continents. And I grew up knowing that cars were necessary. Who are they necessary for? I grew up under that model. If you didn't have a car by a certain age, you weren't doing something right. You weren't doing great in life. All of that. Actually owning a car 5 years ago, I decided to break away with these old mental models. I was really comfortable in a good company, and I decided to break away from all of that. I decided to come up with a startup idea, start from scratch. And I started looking at the city critically. We have transport systems that are comfortable, carbon neutral, culturally, even because I become acquainted with the behavior of the city. I become acquainted with the differences in people because I'm there. These people are looking at their cell phone. These people are listening to music. These people are talking about this and that. It's about learning to admire what surrounds you, and paying attention to the services that add value to you, and that give you efficiency when it comes to using your money. Now, airplanes. Why is it that 500 people need to travel from different parts of the world to get together to talk for 3 days? And there are carbon emissions involved in all of that. We are able to create a lot of impact. We have technologies and we have this magic. So today, I'm really critical. I really ask myself about the things that surround me in my life. Is this really necessary? Is this critical? I'm more aware, but I still have a long way to go.
Santiago, what have you done in your day-to-day life?
Now, this is a beautiful story because my mom is a 61-year-old woman. She was a teacher at the poorer sectors in Medellin for 25 years. And she actually worked on a lot of recycling initiatives where she taught, and obviously she did the same at home. I graduated from a public university in Colombia, and then I had the opportunity to study political sciences in Spain. And that's when I started to change because Europe, during the first connection I had, the city I lived in Spain was a very old city, and it shocked. What shocked me was how clean it was. I'm talking about Madrid, and it was similar to Medellin. It in Medellin, the aspect of the street is absolutely important. Keeping the streets clean, for example, that's key in Medellin as well as Barcelona. And I was really taught, to recycle. I learned from very early on that you can actually get value from waste, and that doesn't happen elsewhere. Just children are told to recycle, and that's it. Why do we have to recycle? Because we tell you to, as opposed to seeing the value in recycling. My kid actually is sort of the is in charge with overseeing the family orchard. We have a mini orchard, and we have that there because I want to teach my kid how to cook. I love to cook, and my spouse doesn't cook, so that's interesting in and of itself. Cooking, taking a shower, all of that is done efficiently. For 2 years, I've actually tried to cut down on red meat. I want to migrate to exclusively vegetable proteins. I haven't really been able to get there. I've been experimenting with grains. These are habits. I've had a hard time, supplying all of the necessary protein to all of this body. I do have a car, but I want to get an electric one. I need money for that, but that's the next goal. And something that's really common for Antiochian moms. Antiochian moms are very hard, and they'll just turn off lights and unplug the computer and whatever. We have a lights out time. So we've become more efficient in terms of achievements. We're able to reduce our carbon emissions a lot.
Jorge, what have you done in your day-to-day life?
Well, here's the thing. I have a problem. I'm the oldest one here, the least young one.
Is also an opportunity.
And yeah, and I've been an athlete all my life. I'm into working out and I've always been very physical. And what happens with athletes is that we have a lot of determination. We're very self determined. Now, in my home, nothing is plugged in unless it needs to be plugged in. Some things need to be plugged in constantly, such as a fridge. And whoever goes to my house, they have to become acquainted with the rules. My daughters actually had a hard time making this transition, but now they have completely adapted. Number one. And number two, everything in my house has one place. If I were blind, I would be able to find the keys to my car because they're in one specific spot. There's another thing in my house. I love to cook. And at home, not a single grain of rice is wasted. So I am able to cook with whatever I happen to have in my fridge and in my pantry. My girlfriend asks me, how can you cook with that? And I ask her, how can you have all this stuff in your fridge and in your pantry and not use any of that? I wouldn't be able to. People who like to cook, such as me, we like fresh things. So I usually buy food for 3 or 4 days. And if I run out of something, I don't stress out by it. I don't sweat it. So what I do is I cook with what I have. Now, I'm telling you all this because I have some connection with the church, the local church where I live. And I told the priest that I wanted to go to the church and donate my time and some of my culinary talent because I wanted to cook for children. He has 600 children, and he told me, wait, you can cook for all 600 of them. And I was like, whoa, 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 let's take it, the bite sizes, baby steps. So 80 to 100, I cook for those kids because I learned to cook with very few ingredients. I learned to cook delicious meals out of very little food.
I was thinking about that actually because me and my daughter have this thing, we have a how much there is means we look at the pantry, we look at the fridge, we look at what we have, how much rice we have on that day, how much sauce we have on that day, and we cook with that. I grew up in the 80s back when Chile was going through a very tough economy crisis, so we all were hand-me-down clothes. I learned how to cook with what we happened to have, and that was extremely relevant. For example, I learned that the blacker banana is, the sweeter it is. So it's an excellent substitute for sugar. So if you need to add sugar to something and sugar is not really that healthy, so you should add a black banana to it as a sweetener. And I learned those kinds of things. I walked everywhere, and also that taught me to carry only the essentials, maybe books, jacket, boots for the cold, and that's it. It taught me to be efficient. And the other thing is that we purchased reusable COVID masks, We washed them down with a copper solution to make them reusable, but then I wonder what happens with the personal protection equipment,
Several of my friends actually got stuck in Miami as a result of lockdown. There was a culture up there of, using 3 or 4 of face masks on one day. And today, these products are blowing up everywhere. I don't know what we're going to do about it. What do you guys think?
These products are blowing up everywhere. I don't know what we're going to do about it. What do you guys think? We're going to have masks in wastewater even? Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a problem that we're going to have makes face masks being dumped in the ocean. Make no mistake. That's going to happen. Also, we have another problem, delivery. Delivery is all wrapped in plastic and a lot of different packaging. Styrofoam has been replaced by biodegradable materials, so we've made some progress there, but everything is packaged or wrapped in plastic. We usually get a paper bag with our delivery, but when we look inside, plastic wrap, So some habits die hard. I mean, plastic has helped us and improved our life quality or whatever, but the problem is that plastic is generally single use. So that's the big problem with plastic. Plastic per se is not the problem, it's single use that's a problem. We have to invest in eco design in order to look for biodegradable materials, decomposable materials, and decomposable materials, thinking about the user. Also, what I mean by that is shortening the chain. All of the plastic I get in my house, if it's biodegradable, I should try to compost it at home, dissolve it in water, or do something with it. I mean, that's radical innovation in and of itself. We need to think differently. We need to think of the future that Mauricio is telling us about. There's things that we need in order to have the life quality we have today. Now, what we have to think about is how to produce those biomaterials and how to scale up their production so that they are sustainable.
I want to say something, regarding our habits. I think the most important thing is to stop being embarrassed. Yeah, oh yeah, embarrassed. Yeah. You grew up during the 80s and whatever. So did I. And my mom is the best. My mom is the best. Honestly, I don't know how she did it. My dad, for example, he would rip a hole in his sweater or whatever. And with that sweater, she would rip it apart. She would rip that sweater apart and she would make two vests and a pair of shorts for me out of that sweater. It was amazing. To this day, I don't know how she did it. To this day, nothing goes to waste in my house, not even food. So, what I mean by embarrassment is that people will go like, "Oh, well, I just have some pasta and two tomatoes and that's it." That's a meal. That's a meal. Certain friends, such as your friends in Miami, go like, "Well, I mean, let's go buy some more stuff because I mean, come on, dude." I mean, it's about not being embarrassment. Or, for example, your friends in Miami might go like, "Wait, so you only have 5 pairs of jeans?" I have less than that. And as the pandemic started, I used to wear a lot of button shirts. And as soon as the pandemic started, I was like, I mean, I don't have a lot of button t-shirts, button shirts, sorry. And I only have what I need. And if I have clothing that I haven't worn in 3 months, I'll just give it away because that's a goal, living with less. Also, I know exactly how much I have of any given thing. When you have a bunch of something, then your cleaning lady will take some things. I'll usually give her some things. That's what you do. That's some efficiency. And oh, hey, thank you for mentioning that. Now I live by myself at home. It's just me, and I had a cleaning lady. And I'm not really comfortable with a person going like, it's usually like, man, I don't like it when, yeah, working. Welcome to the modern world. Yeah, I mean, I do clean. I do clean from time to time. My house is always clean. My mother-in-law could show up unannounced whenever she wants. And my house is always impeccable. It's always spotless. And I actually have, schedules. I make some time to clean my house. And, you run your finger through my paintings, there's no dust.
What are the habits involved in sustainable living, even gender? Tell me about equality at work. We might have some audience members that might agree or disagree about the fact that we need to differentiate gender in this case. And that's an issue. Well, mm, sustainability, circular economy needs to be connected with equality and context as well. You know what else it needs? Diversity. Because diversity provides us of different perspectives and enriches sustainability. Our company is a public company traditionally because it is an engineering company and it's very operative. Women haven't really been the protagonists as they should have been, even though our CEO is a woman and the master system management, aka the brain of the entire operation, is also a woman. We're talking about very capable, skilled economists and engineers who are women. And regarding men and women, I mean, it's not the only component. It's been challenging today as a company. We are aware of the need for diversity in involving other perspectives at a directive level, at an administrative level, and at operational level. The entire company has been really receptive regarding why diversity is important, why gender equality is important. We're starting to develop a route with the Ministry of Labor, working towards getting the Equipares seal. This is a special award for gender equal places. And I believe we are taking big steps regarding this. Also in the communications areas in my company, we're also developing activities that will allow us to succeed in this. And I think also it will help strengthen the strengthening of other companies with equality, leverage, and strengthening and empowering the human elements as well.
I'm going to go back to the beginning. Mexico has a very chauvinistic culture. Sure, we sure do. And we continue to perpetuate it. We continue putting it on TV all the time, so to speak, Obviously, our culture, our artists, the old classic filmmaking, in Mexico or whatever, that perpetuated a lot of stereotypes. And we do have to acknowledge other very progressive things. I think as a society, we're too clumsy at understanding diversity. And because we're so clumsy to understand the diversity, we have a lot of discrimination. Not a lot of people are certain between sexual identity and sexual orientation. That's clumsy right then and there, and the result of that is not being able to making accurate decisions in companies or in government institutions. So during all throughout 2020, we've been working on creating the roadmap. There was a diagnostic component where men and women, etc., who were representatives of the area, we put the topic on the table, gender perspective, and I was shocked at people connecting gender perspective in this new paradigm. Usually, people pay attention to what they have to do on a day-to-day basis. People pay attention to their area, to their job position, and they're not connecting that with gender equality and with the need to evolve. And as I said, I come from a family where I have a super empowered mom. I grew up with my dad also, but back then, I guess they were very progressive for their time. Both work, both cook, both tend to the household. So back in their times, they were very progressive, I guess. And if we can't convey this value to children, sure, you're absolutely right. We haven't been able to uniform language because, I haven't really grasped how it works. I know it's politically correct, but it's really important to start being us being accountable. We need to start being accountable as opposed to trying to make others accountable. We need to lead by example. There are some governments, New Zealand, for example, who's at the forefront? Women. And that's why I said this is the time for women to shine. The world is transforming. COVID is showing us many different things that we previously ignored. And women today see the world, I think, clearer in a clearer manner than we do. So we needed to get together around these round square tables, as we said at the beginning, to talk about gender.
Right, yeah. And the United Nations have actually incorporated a gender perspective in the goals. Usually, women are the ones who make decisions when it comes to household consumption. You know, women make decisions of consumption, and they're usually the most affected by climate change as a result of migration decisions and looking after their children in households. We're talking about traditional societies. Does Medellin have a program that would seem like an early victory when it comes to including gender and climate change?
Well, we do have to recognize that in Medellin, we're emotionally illiterate when it comes to, I guess, both sexes coming together and working together. We're a global Latin American culture, and as such, we need to understand this emotional literacy. We need to get to know ourselves better if we want to get to know others. In Medellin, we still have this heavy Catholic traditionalism that hasn't been exactly fair to women. It hasn't provided the opportunity for women to be in contexts of change and progression. Antioquia is a very priest-like society, which is weird because we live under a matriarchy, I guess. My mother, for example, has a lot of male energy. She's super empowered and everything, So that means that we have chauvinistic women, which is paradoxical. We have chauvinistic women in Antioquia. And it's weird because I grew up with my mom and with my sister. They're both really empowered women. They're really autonomous. They don't need no man, as the saying goes, but they're chauvinistic. They have these macho perspectives, my sister and my mom. So, I've been working on this with my son, My mom talks to my son, in chauvinistic terms, and I've been trying to curtail that influence on him. Medellin has empowered women greatly. A lot of big business people in my territory are women. So we've been making progress, but we still have a long way to go. It's about aesthetics, actually. That is a huge, that is a big deal in Medellin because there's this drug dealing culture in Medellin, and there's that has an impact on the aesthetics of women, So to conclude, I mean, we're a society. We come from a vain society. We have a vain society, a very conservative society that is also very vain. That is what I don't want my son to follow. I want my son to I want my son to see women for what they are, as opposed to an idealized version of women and what they should be based on a drug dealing culture or a highly conservative, highly paternalistic, chauvinistic culture. I'm going to tell you guys something, actually. We were at the Bogota Hotel, at the Movich Hotel, and the America, the Cali soccer team, was actually staying there. Oh yeah, the women's soccer team. Yeah, the women's soccer team. And I told my son, these are women from Cali, and they're not that pretty. They're not as pretty as they should be. And that turned into a whole debate. Why aren't they as pretty as they should be, quote unquote? Well, because they play a manly sport. They come from certain sectors in Cali. They don't pay attention to their looks. You see what I mean? It's about the aesthetics. It's about the looks. It's about what we consider beauty to be in women and in men. Now, the conclusion is that I believe men in Latin America need to exploit their feminine side, and us being able to find that us finding that we had a feminine side was embarrassing. Generally, we grew up with matriarchal mothers or patriarchal fathers.
Circular economy actually looks to nature, draws inspiration with nature, and nature is a woman.
Right, yeah. And I mean, doubtlessly, women have an emotional, sensorial, and morphologic aspect that men lack. And the post COVID scenario is an extra sensorial scenario. So your adaptability will happen quicker because of maternity. And maternity cannot be understood from. I knew you were gonna say something. No, when it comes to child rearing and giving birth, but as political animals that we are, from the paternal and the maternal, and that comes with a stigma associated to chauvinistic tendencies, and the feminine condition of natural maternity, in my opinion, is the cherry on the cake that women are. That's extrasensorial, being able to give birth to a human being. Please.
I mean, everything you've said is pretty much a topic that I guess, I don't know, look, today, being a woman is not just about being able to give birth.
That's why I said that. That's why I said, even if you want to have a.
Even if, no, I mean, because we have transgender people, non-cisgender people, and that's a huge debate in feminism right now with these other topics. But I do sort of guess what you were trying to get at. Femininity is not necessarily associated with the genitality of women, necessarily. And I guess it's important to make that clear. Intersectionality is something that we need to be clear on. But what's good about this conversation is actually the ability we have to have different opinions framed in respect. Because, in these types of spaces, we will, I guess, come up with the ideas that will allow us to secure the future of coming generations. That is why it's so relevant. Us being together, saying social, and maybe practicing spatial distancing as opposed to social distancing, I guess. We need to socialize. We need either digitally or face to face, through a virtual platform or whatever, but we need to talk. We need to be able to have conversations. That is one thing that separates us from animals. We're able to agree. We all agree, I guess, that circular economy is the future, and we need to go to the future together. So circular economy is a space for conversation. CEFA is also such space. I would like to thank all of you. I would like to thank all of you human beings for being here and for contributing ideas and having a more circular continent.
Thank you very much to the organizing team, Kevin de Cuba, and all of the team.
Thank you very much for the CEFA 2020.